Welcome to Whispers in the Dark. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, leave a comment, and check out the amazing products in the description. Now enjoy the story.
I never thought I'd talk about what happened at that ranch again. It's been almost 2 years, but the memories are still so vivid that sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat, with that feeling of being watched. I've worked as a rural veterinarian in Presidio County, Texas, for over a decade. I serve isolated farms along the border with Mexico, places where the horizon stretches endlessly, and where the silence of the desert is only broken by the occasional howl of coyotes. It's a solitary job, but I've always adapted well to solitude. It was late July, at the height of the Texas summer, when I got a call from Miguel Ramirez. His family owned a small goat ranch about 40 minutes from the nearest town. His voice was strained when he explained that 6 of his goats had turned up dead in the pen that morning. It wasn't uncommon to lose animals to predators in the area: coyotes, mountain lions, occasionally even bears wandering over from the Mexican side of the border. But what Miguel described didn't sound like a typical predator attack. The goats hadn't been eaten or dragged away. They were just lying there, with small puncture wounds in their necks and completely drained of blood. I loaded my gear into my pickup truck and headed to the Ramirez Ranch. The dirt road leading to the property snaked through miles of sun-baked chaparral, gnarled bushes, and cacti that looked like silent sentinels guarding the arid expanse. The heat was oppressive, even with the air conditioning blasting in the cab. As I got closer to the ranch, an inexplicable unease began to grow inside me. Maybe it was just the desolation of that landscape, or maybe something more, something my subconscious picked up on before I could even process it. Miguel was waiting for me at the main gate, his cowboy hat pulled low over his eyes to shield him from the relentless sun. His face was drawn, with deep circles under his eyes that betrayed a sleepless night. When I got out of the truck, he shook my hand firmly and thanked me for coming so quickly. He wasn't a man of many words, but I could tell something was deeply disturbing him. As we walked towards the pen, he told me his family had been in the area for generations, and they had never seen anything like it. I asked if it could have been a wild animal, maybe a hungry mountain lion, but he shook his head. He explained that a regular predator would have left tracks, would have torn the prey, eaten parts of them. These goats were intact, except for the small puncture wounds in their necks. The pen was in the center of the property, surrounded by a few sparse trees that offered minimal shade. As soon as we entered, the metallic smell of dried blood mixed with the animal odor hit me. The dead goats had already been lined up under a tarp. Miguel pulled it back so I could examine them. I immediately realized this was not normal. There were no signs of struggle, no torn flesh or chewed limbs. Just small, precise holes, as if made by a tool, in the neck of each animal. Even more disturbing was the absence of blood. Even in the wounds, there was no visible coagulation. I performed a basic necropsy on one of the animals right there. The conclusion was baffling: the goat was completely drained of blood, not just from the surface areas, but from the entire body. It was as if something had methodically sucked out every drop. I asked Miguel if he had noticed anything unusual in recent days. He hesitated for a moment, glancing nervously at the hills surrounding the ranch before answering. He confessed that his youngest son, 12 years old, had seen something strange 2 nights ago. A crouched figure near the chicken coop, with gray skin and red glints in its eyes when the flashlight beam hit them. The boy thought it was a particularly large coyote and ran inside. The next day, 3 chickens were dead in the same way as the goats. As we talked, I noticed the marks on the ground around the pen. They weren't tracks from any animal I knew. They looked almost reptilian, but much larger, with 3 long toes ending in sharp claws. The marks disappeared in the direction of a dry creek bed that crossed the property and extended towards a rock formation a few hundred yards away. As the afternoon wore on, a feeling of unease grew. Miguel suggested I spend the night in the ranch's guest house and continue the investigation in the morning. I accepted, mainly because I wanted to figure out what was going on there. I called my wife to let her know I wouldn't be home that night. In retrospect, that was the first of many decisions I deeply regretted. The Ramirez's main house was a 1-story adobe building, typical of the local architecture, with thick walls to keep the interior cool. The guest house was about 30 yards away, next to a small orchard of fruit trees. The family welcomed me for dinner, a tense silence hanging over the table as we ate. Miguel's wife, Elena, seemed particularly nervous, making the sign of the cross whenever anyone mentioned the dead animals. Their youngest son, Marco, barely touched his food. When I gently asked about what he had seen, his eyes filled with fear. He described a creature the size of a large dog, but that moved like a lizard, standing on its hind legs when it stopped to look at him. Its skin was scaly, greenish-gray, and its eyes glowed red like embers. When Marco finished his account, Elena murmured something in Spanish that I didn't fully understand, but I caught the word Chupacabra. The name was vaguely familiar to me from local legends, stories that ranchers told about a mysterious creature that attacked livestock and sucked their blood. I had always considered it folklore, superstitious explanations for common predators or livestock diseases. Now, sitting in that dimly lit kitchen, with the Ramirez family's frightened eyes on me, I wasn't so sure. After dinner, I retired to the guest house. The night was strangely silent, without the usual chorus of crickets and coyotes. I tried to sleep, but I kept tossing and turning, restless. Around 2 in the morning, I heard a noise coming from outside. It wasn't loud, just a faint scratching, like nails scraping against wood. I got up cautiously and grabbed the flashlight I had left on the nightstand. Through the window, I couldn't see anything but the desert darkness. The scratching continued, now accompanied by a low sound, almost a hiss, like a reptile. I decided to go out and check, thinking it might be a common wild animal. I grabbed my tranquilizer rifle, which I always carry to deal with agitated animals, and slowly opened the door. The night air was surprisingly cold, typical of the Texas desert. The full moon bathed the landscape in a ghostly silver light, casting long shadows across the terrain. I aimed the flashlight at the small orchard next to the house, but I didn't see anything unusual. I was about to go back inside when movement in my peripheral vision caught my attention. There, at the edge of the orchard, partially hidden in the shadow of a tree, was a crouched shape. For a moment, I thought it was a dog or maybe a particularly large coyote. But when I moved the flashlight in its direction, the creature rose onto its hind legs and stared at me. The beam of light reflected in 2 red eyes that glowed with an unnatural intensity. It wasn't a coyote, nor any animal I had ever seen in my years as a vet. Its skin was scaly, a greenish-gray hue, and short spines ran down its back. The snout was elongated, with rows of sharp teeth visible when it slightly opened its mouth. Its hands, because there was no other term to describe those limbs, had 3 long fingers ending in blade-like claws. For a moment that felt like forever, we stood motionless, watching each other. My heart was beating so hard I could hear it in my ears. All my scientific training told me that what I was seeing was impossible, but my eyes couldn't deny the reality in front of me. The creature tilted its head, as if studying my reaction, and then, without warning, lunged towards me with terrifying speed. Instinctively, I fired the tranquilizer, but the creature dodged it with supernatural agility. In seconds, it was just a few feet away, and I could smell a strange odor emanating from it, something between musk and rotten meat. I desperately ran back to the house, slamming the door shut behind me. I heard a dull thud against the wood, followed by the same scratching sounds that had woken me up. Through the small window in the door, I saw the red eyes watching me, just inches from the glass. I spent the next few hours cornered, listening to the creature circling the house, testing windows and doors. Occasionally, it emitted a high-pitched sound, almost a whistle, that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I called the Ramirez's main house several times, but no one answered. The feeling of isolation was absolute. When the first ray of sunlight finally pierced through the window, the sound ceased. I waited another hour before venturing outside. The exterior of the house clearly showed signs of the night's visit, deep claw marks in the wood of the door and walls, and those same strange tracks circling the entire structure. Following them, I realized they led towards the main house. What I found there is something that still haunts my nightmares. The front door was ajar, swinging slightly in the morning breeze. I called out for the Ramirez family, but only silence answered. In the kitchen, the breakfast table was set, as if the family had been interrupted at the start of their routine. A cup of coffee was still steaming. I cautiously moved through the rooms, calling out their names in a voice that betrayed my growing dread. In the hallway leading to the bedrooms, I noticed the first drops of blood. A thin trail that thickened as I advanced. The master bedroom was empty, the bed unmade, sheets pulled back as if someone had been dragged away. Marco's room, however. God, I can still see it clearly. The boy was lying near the window, 2 small puncture wounds in his neck, his small, fragile body completely drained, his skin almost translucent white. His open eyes stare at the ceiling, frozen in indescribable terror. I rushed to check the other rooms, finding Elena in the bathroom, in the same terrible condition. Of Miguel, however, there was no sign, only a trail of blood leading out of the house, towards the dry creek bed. I followed it in a state of shock and dread, my brain unable to fully process the horror of what was happening. The trail ended abruptly at the edge of the creek. I looked around, desperate, and that's when I noticed an opening in the rocks of the bank, partially hidden by thorny bushes. I approached cautiously. It was the entrance to a small cave, and the smell emanating from it turned my stomach, that same musky odor of the creature, now mixed with the unmistakable scent of fresh blood. My reason told me to retreat, to seek help, but concern for Miguel pushed me forward. I turned on my flashlight and entered the cave. The interior was surprisingly deep, a natural tunnel that sloped gradually downwards. The walls were smooth, as if they had been polished by water over millennia. As I moved forward, the tunnel widened into a larger chamber. The beam of my flashlight revealed a grotesque spectacle, bones scattered across the floor, some clearly animal, others disturbingly human-like. In a corner, I found Miguel, his lifeless body slumped against the rock wall, showing the same signs as his family members. That's when I heard it, the low, hissing sound coming from the depths of the cave. Not one, but several voices, a chorus of hisses that chilled my blood. My flashlight beam caught movement in the shadows, and then another, and another. Red eyes began to appear in the darkness, 2 pairs, then 3, then more than I could count. It wasn't an isolated creature. It was an entire colony. Panic finally overwhelmed me. I backed away, stumbling over the bones, and ran desperately back through the tunnel. Behind me, I heard the sound of claws scratching against the stone, approaching rapidly. Emerging from the cave, I sprinted to my truck and sped down the dirt road, repeatedly glancing in the rearview mirror, fearing to see those creatures chasing me in the merciless midday sun. I drove straight to the county sheriff's office. The sheriff listened to my story with growing skepticism, but something in my state, probably my wide-eyed terror in clothes stained with the Ramirez's blood, convinced him to send a team to investigate. I accompanied them back to the ranch, but when we arrived, the scene had changed. The bodies of Elena and Marco had disappeared. In the main house, only bloodstains remained as testament to the horror I had witnessed. The cave, when we located it, turned out to be a small natural cleft, with no tunnel, no chamber, no scattered bones. The sheriff looked at me with a mixture of confusion and suspicion. In the following weeks, I was questioned repeatedly. The authorities found the bodies of the Ramirez family 3 days later, in a ravine miles away from the property. The official verdict was wild animal attack, possibly mountain lions. As for the blood-drained goats and my descriptions of the creature and the cave, they were attributed to stress and perhaps hallucinations caused by the extreme heat. Miguel and his family were buried, the case was closed, and life moved on for everyone except me. I requested a transfer to a clinic in a larger city and moved away from the border. I stopped serving isolated rural properties, and I rarely go out after sunset. My wife says I've developed a pathological anxiety, and maybe she's right. But at night, when the wind blows and I hear scratching on the walls of our house, I can't shake the thought that they found me. That they're waiting, watching with those red eyes through the windows, planning the perfect moment to complete what they started at that isolated ranch. And on the quietest nights, when I can't sleep, it seems like I can hear, carried on the hot desert breeze, that distant hiss. A reminder that the Chupacabra isn't just a legend to scare children. It's real, it's spreading, and no one will believe it until it's too late.
We've reached the end of our story. What did you think? Leave a comment and share your thoughts. Don't forget to follow the channel, like the video, and check out the amazing products in the description. And don't miss the next video, you're going to love it.